Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day, there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And you have no idea how excited I am to talk to today's guest because we're going to be talking about books. Yay! I love books. I think I live in a library. And I grew up in that generation where we read all the time, right? And they had book fairs at our schools and all these. And we've gotten away from that, but it's okay. We don't have to have physical books. We can do things on Kindle and all of those. But to me, books are the way that you escape and you learn and you grow. And so I am so excited to be speaking with Melanie Bell today. Melanie, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this.
Great.
So Melanie Bell is the founder of Leaders Who Fiction, an online book club and community that offers a unique way for people to acquire and develop leadership qualities through reading and discussing novels. On this fast-growing platform, leaders meet on the last Wednesday of each month for intellectual, business-oriented conversations centered around a selected novel. Melanie is also the co-founder of Strategic Peace, where she works with C-suite executives at growth stage companies to deliver exceptional revenue growth by bringing together their marketing, sales, and service teams around an information-driven customer experience built on the HubSpot platform. Oh my gosh, Melanie, like I said, we're going to have so much fun. But, I always like finding out from my guests how it is that they got to where they are today. So how did you decide that combining fiction and business is the way to go?
Sure. So there were a few kind of kernels that dropped for me over several years. It wasn't a eureka moment so much. Exactly. Although those are always fun when they happen. Mm-hmm. So I started my career in marketing. And then after a few years, I went back and got my MBA. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And after I finished business school, my friend recommended this sci-fi book. And I'm not a huge sci-fi reader, but mm-hmm. I was interested in this particular mm-hmm. book. So I read it. And I remember laying on my couch reading this book and thinking, this is what we should have been reading in my organizational behavior class. It was so much better than a lot of the business books that I had read through business school. I think it would have gotten through to students a lot better. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the first kernel. And then I didn't read as much once I was working as I did growing up, and I really mm-hmm. missed it. And so over a couple of years, I really wanted to get back into reading, and I started doing it. And as I talked to friends and clients and about what I was reading, so many people kept saying, like, oh my gosh, it's been so long since I've read a novel, and I really missed that. And so
read for fun.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so eventually it was just like, you know what? A lot of times we just need the excuse mm-hmm. to prioritize something. Right. And so that was where Leaders Who Fiction mm-hmm. came from. Mm-hmm. Was from that.
I love it. And we talk about it sometimes. I mean, one of the biggest things that I always hear is George Orwell's 1984, right? Mm-hmm. And, an Animal Farm. I mean, those, books like those, it really do pertain to just people in general, and then of course businesses. But as I was reading your information, one of the things I thought of, and like I said, I mean, this is just, I'm surrounded by books. Every room I go in has books, and I love books and all of those things. Is there a specific genre that works better for learning kind of the business thing?
So I think I think you can find it in any genre.
Okay.
Just
Even romance novels?
oh, maybe not romance. Romance can be involved, but maybe not the primary genre.
Hmm.
I do think a lot of sci-fi and
Hmm.
fiction books lend themselves
Hmm.
really well to leadership lessons.
Hmm.
Um, Anytime there's a trip or a journey with people, I
Hmm.
think you just naturally
Hmm.
get the human dynamics at play and politics
Hmm.
and all sorts of interesting stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I'm currently reading a book that's just contemporary literary
Hmm.
fiction called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It came out a few years ago,
Hmm.
and it's about two friends who start a video game development company. And
Hmm.
so that one, I mean, they talk so much about their work lives in
Right.
it.
Hmm.
That lends itself obviously really
Hmm.
well to this too.
Hmm.
I think we've read, I try to keep the reading books a mix in the group so that we're
Hmm.
not just reading in one genre.
Hmm.
You know, we'll mix in some historical fiction,
Hmm.
some thrillers.
Hmm.
So, but a lot of times, again, maybe not romance. You've kind of stumped me on that, but now I'm going to have like this mission of like, can I find
A
a
lot of
romance
times
book?
they've got a business that they're doing or something, and
Yeah, yeah. Now I'm going to have to go find a romance book where I can pull leadership lessons from it.
well, historical fiction might be, because you can kind of cross those over with
Yes.
romance. But I love that, and it's funny that we think that it's that we read. If we're going to read, and yes, folks, you need to read. Hello, you need to be reading. I don't care if it's online, physical book, whatever. Um, we always need to be increasing our knowledge, our all sorts of things, and you get that through reading. But it's one of these things where it is, I think we think it has to be either or. We
Yeah.
can't be reading for fun and learning from it, and you really emphasize the fact that no, it's both.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think in some ways I've kind of wrestled with that of like,
Mm-hmm.
have I co-opted? I do think people need to have hobbies and active interests,
Mm-hmm.
and it's important to have time that's maybe not productive
Mm-hmm.
time. Um, but this one I'm just like, no, it's got so
Mm-hmm.
many layered benefits
Right.
and values
Mm-hmm.
that you get out of it
Mm-hmm.
that it isn't an either or, it's a yes and
Right. Right.
situation.
And I read a lot of books, business books,
Yeah.
especially because of the podcast. We have a lot of authors who are on, and I always tell them, if you want to talk about your book on the program, you have to get me a copy. Now, it doesn't
Right.
have to be a physical copy. They don't need to go through that expense. And so, I get digital versions, and I read through them. And it's really funny because the ones that I enjoy the most are the ones that include the stories and the personal anecdotes.
Yeah.
And I think that really is the key to it, is then we go, oh, that's
Hmm.
me. That could have been me. All of those various things.
Yes, exactly. And it's really, I've found as I've read around this, I mean, like, yeah, this is a nice theory, but is there any data that backs kind
Mm-hmm.
of my theories up?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I found really interesting was that from a neuroscience perspective, our
Mm-hmm.
brains switch into simulation mode when we read. And
Oh.
so we actually, when we talk about,
Mm-hmm.
reading and you walk around in somebody else's skin, for
Mm-hmm.
instance,
Mm-hmm.
but we actually really do. Our brains are when
Mm-hmm.
we read, our brains, we are putting ourselves into that
Right,
protagonist's
because we
shoes.
start visualizing it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, um,
Well, and we, like I said, a lot of business books, it's really hard to visualize the business things, right? And but yeah, when they start saying, hey, we had a client that this happened to, or knowing more about their backstory or things that happened to them, then it is, we switch that on and we start visualizing it.
yeah. Yeah. So it is really powerful when you get to essentially go practice being in those scenarios. You don't have to necessarily always um, have to be in the school of hard knocks
Mm-hmm.
in the same
Mm-hmm.
way. The reading can help save you on that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've got on your website, you've got several resources that actually talk about how this happens, that fiction really can help you be a better leader. So tell us a little bit more about some of those, because I'm guessing we probably have some skeptics that are listening.
Sure. Sure. I mean, a lot of a lot of the benefits tend to err on what people call soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
And we can get in debate the term soft skills, as some people are like, oh, but those are the really important ones,
Mm-hmm.
empathy and communication. Um, I think as I was mentioning before, if our brains are in simulation mode and we're experiencing life as somebody else, that
Mm-hmm.
really impacts our ability to
Mm-hmm.
empathize with other people. When we're reading, and I'll say quality literature, so not that there's anything wrong with a fun beach read or
Chick
picture.
lit beach books. Yeah.
Right, exactly. They've got their time and place. I'm not trying to knock them,
Mm-hmm.
but they're probably not where you're going to be like, oh, I'm becoming a better writer or a
Mm-hmm.
communicator. But I noticed that in myself. Like I became more confident as I started reading more just in
Mm-hmm.
my communication with
Mm-hmm.
clients, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's another one where it's really important. But I just think in terms of psychology and understanding people and being able to understand power dynamics at play. And I mean, that you really just get that a lot
Mm-hmm.
from literature.
Right. And it is interesting because it's like you said, we put ourselves in those positions. And it's always fun when you get to the end of the book and you're like, oh, so that's what I like about series, right? Because
Yes.
you can go on with them. But we it's it is tricky because we think, well, this is fluff, and I'm going to use fluff just to cover all of them.
Sure.
And we're not learning something. But when did you first realize, you kind of were touching on it, when you were much younger, that this is something where people can learn to be leaders?
Yeah. So to me, so the book I was reading was called Ender's Game, and it's by
Mhm.
an author called Orson Scott Card. And it's
Mhm.
actually a book that, teenagers can read. It's
Right.
not
Hmm.
necessarily adult fiction.
Hmm.
Um, and it's about the end of the world and someone
Hmm.
trying to save the world
Hmm.
and um, having and being appointed into that leadership role where he really the fate of the world is on
Hmm.
his shoulders. And it just the group dynamics were fascinating in it, and the loneliness of a leader. I mean,
Hmm.
the first time I became a manager,
Right.
that's a really hard
Hmm.
thing. All of a sudden, people who were your peers and your friends
You
are
can't go out for
no
Friday
longer.
night drinks.
Exactly, exactly. Um, and so that one to me just was really that
Hmm.
first time, like I said, of being like, wow, this is like what we could have been reading.
Hmm.
Um, and should be reading, in my opinion, should
Right.
be reading to
Hmm.
be better leaders.
And to me, like I said, I don't care what it is. I think we need to be reading. It
Mhm.
increases our vocabulary, just all sorts of things. And even for those who have challenges, maybe they're dyslexic, maybe they didn't learn to read, there
Yep.
are certainly ways, to be able to do that. And, but that does kind of bring me to, our Audible books the same as if you're reading it? Do you absorb it the same way?
So I think it's a little bit different. Our brains are functioning in a slightly
Mm-hmm.
different way, but I think I think audiobooks are wonderful. Like
Right.
I'm
Because you're
all
still
for
having to envision it,
you're
right?
still
Mm-hmm.
visualizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, for almost our whole human history,
Mm-hmm.
most of our storytelling has been
Right.
oral
Mm-hmm.
storytelling. And it's
Mm-hmm.
only recently where we've had mass literacy,
Mm-hmm.
where people would be actually able to sit down and
Mm-hmm.
read a physical book on their
Mm-hmm.
own. And so I just think there's something to that oral storytelling
Mm-hmm.
tradition. And so if that's what you love doing,
Mm-hmm.
then it still counts as reading.
Right. And I always love it when it's the authors who are
Yeah.
are reading it, because then I'm thinking, they're you're envisioning what they were thinking when they were writing it,
Yes.
and so, but, and, of course they're just reading it, it's not, but they
Yeah.
do, I think, a lot of times put a little bit different twist on it.
Yeah.
They know, okay, I really wanted to emphasize this word,
Mhm.
and, someone that's just being paid to do it, might miss that those little nuances.
Yes. And I think what I found is like there are certain people in our group who they really like audiobooks,
Mhm.
and they'll find a favorite narrator and then they'll go listen
Ah,
to all of the
okay.
books that that person has
Okay.
read
So
because
there's something about that voice that
that
they, okay.
style, yes, that
Hmm.
they really enjoy.
Interesting. I love that. Well, now
Yeah.
you just mentioned your group. So talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about that.
Sure. So we've been around for about 2 years, and
Okay.
it's a hobby project of mine to do this. And
Hmm.
so it's a really interesting, I think, mix of people that we have as part of the group.
Hmm.
Um, very different types of professionals, some entrepreneurs, some not entrepreneurs, business coaches, consultants. I mean, kind of a wide gamut.
Hmm.
And we run pretty strictly for an hour. And we
Hmm.
actually talk about the book. So this is another thing because we meet on Zoom
Hmm.
um, over what is my lunch break. So,
And they have to have their cameras on, I'm
yeah,
guessing.
most of the time, yes. Although if somebody has, most of the time people will have occasionally an off day and then it's
Right. Or they
fine. But
don't
most
want
of
people
the,
to see them eating lunch, right?
yes, but most of the time people have their cameras on.
Hmm.
Um, and we talk about the book like a normal book club.
Okay.
And so we'll start off general impressions, big,
Hmm.
what did we notice? Who
Hmm.
did we like or not like? And just kind of ease into it.
Hmm.
But we do talk about leadership
Hmm.
themes um, in each of the books. And so what's interesting is did you like this book or did you not like this book? It might help guide somebody of like,
Hmm.
I'm facing this scenario.
Hmm.
And I say at work, but we have leadership skills whether we're at work or not at
Right.
work.
When you're
So
trying
it's
to get
all
your
over.
kids to do their homework, right? Hmm.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So I'm facing this scenario. Will this book help me or not? Sometimes that comes out
Hmm.
in the, like, did you like this book? Not like this
Hmm.
book. Um, and then we do talk about leadership themes and people's personal experiences
Hmm.
if they've got stuff that's relevant to that. And it's nice. The conversation stays pretty respectful, even when people disagree. And it's always fun when people disagree.
Hmm.
And it's much more interesting to me that
Hmm.
way. Yeah.
Right. So
So,
how do you pick your books?
so it's a combination of things. I do take recommendations from
Hmm.
the group. If people think that there's a
Hmm.
good book that's relevant, I'll take that into account. I try, like I said, to keep a mix of genres
Hmm.
so that we're not just, becoming
Right.
the
It's
sort
not
of
all science fiction or
exactly.
mysteries or whatever. Hmm.
Exactly. Because I think one of the joys that people get out of a book club is that you
Hmm.
read stuff that you wouldn't pick up on your
Hmm.
own.
Right.
And sometimes that is okay, kind of just forcing, we're going to read different
Hmm.
genres. And I try to also keep a balance between male and female authors so
Okay.
that we're not too heavy
Hmm.
on one gender or the
Hmm.
other. And then the other thing is I try to make sure that we're not picking books that are too long. So I'm really
Okay.
conscientious of the fact that people are doing this in their spare time as a
Hmm.
hobby. And even though there's some phenomenal books, even they're just a little bit longer, I look at how long the audio book
Right.
is and make sure that
Okay.
it's not, I try to keep it under a
So
certain time.
no War and Peace.
Definitely not.
I love it.
Yeah, and every once in a while I get bummed because I'll read a book that's really good and I'm like, this would be perfect for leaders in fiction. And I'm like, it's about an hour or two
Hmm.
hours too long. And then I'm
Hmm.
like, nope, it's not for
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
So
So do you read the books before you have the group read them to make sure that they're kind of, that they're going to work?
most of the time I do, unless it's a recommendation. So if it's
Okay.
a recommendation that somebody else has already read that book,
Hmm.
then I'm okay with.
And then
Um,
do they lead the conversation?
so we are about to have that for the first time, where someone is going to basically
Hmm.
co-host the meeting with me.
Hmm.
So our first time doing that will be
Hmm.
in May.
I love it.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to
Mhm.
see how that
Mhm.
that plays out. The good thing is our group is everyone's very respectful, but pretty chatty, and so the conversation tends to flow,
Mhm.
and it doesn't need a whole lot of
Mhm.
um, encouragement along the way to get the conversation going either.
So do you have like specific things that you try and talk about every time? Almost, I hate to use the word homework, but almost like that, so that people know, okay, I'm looking for this, or I got to be prepared to talk about that, or.
We haven't really done that. I mean, minus, okay, everyone knows that we're gonna talk what
Mhm.
leadership themes did you pull
Mhm.
out of this book? And we'll also talk pretty regularly about which character we found to be the most compelling leader and,
Okay.
do compare and
Mhm.
contrast leadership styles that
Mhm.
we noticed in the book as well. So those are really the two
Mhm.
sections that get the most
Mhm.
uh, kind of airtime repeatedly.
I love it. So I've got your website open and I'm looking at what you have coming up, and it's a big mix. And so, your
Yeah.
April 2024 book is All the Sinners Bleed, which is considered a thriller. So that's
Yep.
kind of interesting. May is the Lonely Hearts Book Club, and that's been around a while. So
Yeah.
that'll be interesting. And it's considered coming of age. And then your June book is The Alchemist, and that really has been around quite a long time.
Yeah.
And it's considered fantasy. So I love that. And I was just kind of looking through here. You've got historical fiction, science fiction, literary philosophy, mystery. So it really is, you can get something from all of it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it keeps it more interesting to have the
Mm-hmm.
different genres that
Mm-hmm.
we're pulling from. I will say, because there's no requirement, if someone wants to join us, it's like they can show up for a meeting and then not come the
Mm-hmm.
next month. Or we've had some people and they come, I mean, we've been around for 2 years and they'll come twice a year.
Uh-huh.
And so there's not like a hard and fast
Okay.
obligation for this. I think you get more out of it if the more you
Mm-hmm.
come.
Right, because you
Um,
start interacting with the people.
Yes, but we do have people who are like, they show up when we're reading a sci-fi fantasy book.
Okay. Okay. So that's
So
just what they prefer. And they're
that's the
like,
thing.
no, this is dystopian science fiction. Maybe I don't like that.
Right, exactly. And then but a lot of the people that are part of the group do like reading the mix and reading
Mhm.
stuff that they wouldn't have
Right.
read on their own.
Right. And I'm looking through the books that you've done. I many of them I've not heard of, and so I like that. Like, here's one. This was last year, called The Overstory, and it was
Mm,
political nature and environment. So that just sounds like something that would have been, very, very interesting. And like you said, it's one of these things where it's not something people normally, maybe in many cases, would read.
right. Exactly, exactly. And that was a good learning. I've had a lot of good learnings in the last two
Mm-hmm.
years of doing
Mm-hmm.
that one, for the most part, people really enjoyed, but that was definitely one of those books that was just, I think, a little bit too long for 1 month. And at the
Mm-hmm.
time, what I was doing was we would take a break over the summer, and that would be it. We read that over the course of 2 months.
Oh, okay.
But the feedback that I've gotten from people is that they wanted a meeting every month.
Mm-hmm.
And so we no longer have a summer break, but I'm not going to
Ah.
pick a longer book to read.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We'll just keep it shorter.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorites and why? I mean, you've talked about a little about some already, but what are some more of the ones that you were just like, ooh, I could read it again and again and again?
Yeah. So my one of my favorites was the very first book that we read called The Mercies. It's by an author named Kieran Millwood Hargrave,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a British author. And it is historical fiction, and it takes place in Norway in the Arctic Circle
Mm-hmm.
in, I want to say, like the 900s.
Okay.
And it starts in this little tiny town, and all of the men go out to do a whale hunt because they've spotted a whale, and that's how they
Mm-hmm.
get the energy
Mm-hmm.
for and food
Mm-hmm.
for the town. And this wave, and this is based on a true story. This
Mm-hmm.
wave comes up out of nowhere, and all the men die.
Oh no.
And so in this town, it's only women and children who are
Mm-hmm.
left, and they have to figure out how to survive on their own when it's
Mhm.
been considered inappropriate for women to go hunt,
Right.
women to do a lot of
Mhm.
the tasks that men did. And so that particular book, I love the writing in it. And then the story I felt like was really compelling and interesting of this town that gets divided between the women who I don't know how they would survive without the other group, but the other group
Mhm.
who is okay farming and
Mhm.
hunting and doing all of these male tasks for survival. So that was a really good one. Um, we read one last year called The Final Revival of Opal and Nev. Um, that's a really fun one. They had really interesting leadership, different leaders in that
Mhm.
book. And then another one, and I think this was like a crowd favorite, was Project Hail Mary that we read in January this year,
Ah.
um, which is a sci-fi book. It's
Mhm.
another like end of the world
Mhm.
one. And as I'm
Yeah, they're
talking,
doing a Hail Mary, right, to survive.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. I was like, as I'm talking, I'm like, oh, and Parable of the Sower was really good.
Mhm.
Like there, I love them all. I mean, I
Mhm.
really enjoyed a
I mean,
lot of.
that's where it's hard that it's only once a month, right?
Yes, it is. Well, and it's funny because I'll get recommendations, and because some people are slower readers and don't
Mhm.
come to every meeting, I try to make sure that we always have on the website what books we're going to be reading 3 months
Right. Mhm.
out. Um, and so I'll get a recommendation, and I'm like, and I've got kind of have the books lined up for a while in
Mhm.
advance. So it can be hard. I'm like, okay, we'll get to your book in 10 months time.
Mhm. Right.
But it
So
is kind
how many are
of
in the group right now?
so
Of consistent attendees, maybe I should say.
okay, consistent attendees were about 8 or 10.
Okay.
And then kind of the broader community,
Mhm.
there's about 30 or 35
Okay.
people that are part of it. So it's still small. And then,
Mhm.
I mean, I'd like to see it grow.
Mhm.
And then as we grow, if we got up to, I think the point will be if we consistently get about 15 people coming to meetings,
Mhm.
then we'll split into two,
Okay.
offer 2 meeting times.
Mhm.
That way the people still get
Mhm.
time to talk about the
Right.
books and that kind
Yeah, because as you said, it's that conversation
of.
that, and once you get, especially on Zoom, if people are having to go between screens and all sorts of stuff, no, then you lose
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, breakout rooms work really well for
Mhm.
certain things, but I feel like one of the things that's been really interesting is that as the members get to know each
Mhm.
other, they'll recommend, I know so and so will really like this book.
Mhm.
Or I'm really curious what that person is going to have to
Mhm.
say about this particular issue. And so I
Mhm.
think that there's something to be said for kind of, I don't want to just arbitrarily assign people
Mhm.
into a breakout room because I think that there's a nice cohesion when
Right.
it's the same group
Mhm. Mhm.
on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny. I do breakout groups in several of the things that I'm part of,
Yeah.
and it, each other's kind of shorthand, right? And I always feel bad when there's like several of us that know each other and somebody new joins,
Yeah.
because you try to include them, but then you're like, oh my gosh, Melanie, remember when we talked about you?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, I think there's always going to be a little part of that you can't
Mhm.
escape.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't, the feedback that I've gotten from new people has been pretty positive about
Okay,
how they've been included
they've been
in the
welcomed.
group.
Mhm.
And yeah. And I think also the other thing I'll get feedback from someone who's come from the first time, they're like, wow, that really wasn't like my high school English class. I think, there's almost like this, am I
Mhm.
going to be able to keep up with this
Right.
conversation?
Mhm.
Especially, I mean, I didn't like high school English. I was
Mhm.
totally lost in that class. And so I think that there's kind of this perception that maybe reading isn't for someone because they
Mhm.
didn't do well in high school English or they didn't like the way it was
Mhm.
taught. It wasn't fun. It's like, yeah, this is
Mhm.
not what we're trying to do here.
Right. Right. Men mainly, women mainly.
We're skewed a bit more women than
Okay,
men.
that would be what I would have guessed. Mhm.
Yes, but we do have several regular
Mhm.
male attendees as
Mhm.
well. But yeah, it's skewed a little bit more
Mhm.
women. So
Yeah, I love it. and it's fascinating to think, you can be taking these books that somebody goes, oh, this is a thriller, this is sci-fi, and really, and I'm exactly like you. I'm thinking, because I have an MBA. Oh my, if they had included some of the books in some of the things that we had done,
Mm-hmm.
it would have made it so much better, because again, you visualize it, and when
Yeah.
you visualize it, then it stays in your brain longer. I've seen, there's a lot of studies that say handwriting things,
Yes.
as opposed to writing, tapping it out on a computer, you're going to remember it a lot longer.
Yeah.
Now I will look at it and go, I can't read that, I don't know what I just wrote. And so I don't know if that's, but yeah, it is, when we engage our brains more, we're going to remember it longer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, I think we talk about our, I haven't actually seen as much recently, but we talk about like the 21st century job skills that are needed. And it's
Okay.
the creativity and
Mm-hmm.
problem solving and teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so much of there is like you need the imagination. And I'm like, this is stuff that business leadership isn't
Mm-hmm.
all about reading income statements and
Right.
P&Ls and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We do need that innovation and the imagination aspect to it. And so I think this is just such a nice
Mm-hmm.
complement that
Right.
can be there.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny because as we've been talking, one of the things that I kept thinking about is Harry Potter. Now, of course,
Mhm.
you could not do this, obviously, for many reasons. Not the least of which is there's a whole bunch of them. But yeah, just the things that as you're watching either reading the books or watching the movies as an adult, you go, oh yeah, okay. Harry was I almost said a different name. Harry was the leader,
Yes.
and one of the things that always struck me was when he would want to go off on his own. And
Hmm.
Hermione, and it was always Hermione, would say, "You're not in this alone." And to me, that's one of the biggest leadership things is so many times it's funny because leaders do have to be alone, but they still need the support of others.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the trickiest things for somebody to do is to know when to ask. And we're seeing, I think, and maybe these are, these darn millennials that we all fuss about, who, are teaching us these things. You're younger, but I am of the baby boomer generation. And so they're saying, yeah, we need more of the soft things, and our leaders need to reach out and ask for help. And it's, and because it's funny, I talk to a lot of business owners, a lot of people who want to own businesses, both here and out in the real world. And
Yeah.
so many times they say, you know I own the business, I'm the manager, I'm the whatever,
Hmm.
I have to do it all. I have to not admit that I don't know,
Yeah.
and that I need help. And I think that's where, in all of these books, we see that, yeah, they do ask for help. They need help. Gandalf asked for help. Am I on the right book, or did I just switch to Lord of the Rings?
Think it was a switch, but I'm
I did.
following
I think
you.
I just
I'm
switched,
following
right?
you.
Yeah, that's but can you tell what I like? But yeah, those type of people, they ask for help.
Hmm.
When Harry, now granted, there was a certain point where Harry had to go on his own, but then he had the ghosts of the people around him, so he still was not alone. And I think that's so much, it's so important for leaders to know it's okay to ask for help, and more importantly, to say, I don't know everything.
Yeah, definitely. We had part of the conversation that we had with Project Hail Mary. So this guy is on the spaceship and he's whatever, however many light years away from
Mm-hmm.
Earth, and he's by himself.
Yeah.
And so one of the conversations that we had, we didn't really come to a
Mm-hmm.
conclusion, but it was an interesting conversation
Mm-hmm.
was if it's just you,
Mm-hmm.
do you still have, is that considered like, can you lead yourself? Are you leading yourself? Is
Right.
that with leadership skills? If you're,
That is interesting. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So, like I said, we didn't really kind of have any like amazing aha,
Mm-hmm.
here's our formal conclusion on it. But I just think the conversation itself
Mm-hmm.
is interesting to have around
Right.
that. So
Well, and it's funny because a lot of times in those situations, they the lonely person, the alone person
mhm.
creates something. Another figure, whether it's the volleyball that they're talking to, or
Right.
whatever, because they need that feedback. And
Yes.
so obviously they're talking to themselves, but they're the antagonist, they're the protagonist, they're all of those things. And sometimes it's that you just need to say it out loud
Yes.
in order for you to kind of work through those situations.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Well, what are some more of your favorites? Because I'm thinking reading list. We're writing reading list, right?
Yeah, yeah. I will say this book that I'm reading right now, this Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I want to
Mm-hmm.
like now recommend this book to
Mm-hmm.
everyone. Um, it's definitely going to be on one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite lists. I read I'm trying to think. I don't know that it would be necessarily a good leaders who fiction book, but it is one of my all-time favorite books, which is The Book of Form and Emptiness.
Hmm.
And the author is called Ruth Ozeki.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think they're probably good leadership.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm saying, it's not a good fit. I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
there's still that
Mm-hmm.
section
Right.
that would be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, like I said, I mean, even just reading for fun is
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. We all need
Right.
hobbies.
Right. Yeah. It's, and I think it's sad that the literacy rates are dropping. I haven't
Mhm.
seen anything, but I'm still told by any place, you write at the sixth grade level when you're writing something.
Yeah,
And now obviously it depends on who your audience is. If you're
yeah.
writing for PhD people, you're not going to write at
Right.
the
Please
sixth
don't
grade
write at
level.
the sixth grade
Yes,
level.
yes. But for the most part, when you're, and which to me is sad, because you'd think that we should at least be writing to the high school level.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I started to read when I was very, very young. It was one of those things. And one of the things that is my most treasured memory, my dad went to eighth grade. I mean, that was where he stopped.
Hmm.
And but to him, reading was very, very important. I mean, he read every night. He had to read a little bit, but he would read to me.
Hmm.
And it was Misty of Chincoteague, and all
Yeah.
those books that I got at Scholastic book fairs, right?
Yeah.
And all of those. And if he wasn't able, no, mom couldn't do it, and I would not read on my own. And the funny
Yeah.
thing was, I could read. I actually read at a higher level than he did, probably from a fairly young age. But him reading to me was what was so important. And he could have probably been reading the newspaper and I wouldn't have cared. But
Yeah.
I think that's just one of those things. So maybe that is why, I learned at a very early age just how important reading can be, because it's not just the reading of that book. It's that
Yeah.
time you're spending together. And like you said, you dedicate an hour once a month to talk with people about this. So you're not just reading the book, you're having a conversation about it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And we actually we had a couple of members who were regular attendees and then they got new jobs and promotions and then
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't worked for them to
Mm-hmm.
keep coming.
Yeah, it
And
is kind of hard to tell your boss, well, I have this reading club.
exactly. But I'm working on my leadership skills. It's okay.
Right. You
Um,
you should write notes for them to give to their
yeah,
bosses,
so I have started doing well, I haven't done the permission notes, but I have
Mhm.
started putting together summaries. And what I earlier this year, I
Okay.
launched an online like community forum
Hmm.
so that people who couldn't attend the meetings could still take
Okay.
part in the
Hmm.
conversation about the books.
Hmm.
So that's been interesting because it's like people have read the book and then they want to know
Hmm.
what the others have thought
Right.
about it and want
Hmm.
to share their opinions.
Hmm.
And it was funny because before that, everyone would email if they couldn't make the meeting, they would email me, and I'd get sometimes like a page of an
Here's what I
email.
thought about.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, we need a way for you to share this
Hmm.
with everybody else too.
Hmm.
So
Right.
it is
Yeah. Because
there's
yeah,
a strong
everybody is going to
social
get something
bond.
different. Hmm.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so much fun to talk about it
Mhm.
with other people. And I can't remember what company does this, but there's a consulting group where they go in to different companies and will take a team of people or a
Mhm.
department and have all of them read the same book
Mhm.
at the same time. So do like an internal book
Mhm.
club
And is
and
it fiction or is it a business book?
fiction.
Okay.
They'll do fiction. And they said it's been really good. Like, yes, good for team building, but
Mhm.
it's also been good when the team has had an ongoing issue
Mm.
and it gives them a shared vocabulary to
Mhm.
talk about that issue.
Mhm.
And when you're pointing it out and you're not saying, oh, Bob in accounting did this
Right.
wrong, you're talking about characters in a book, people's defenses go down.
Mhm.
And so they're more
Right.
open
You
to
still know you're
feedback.
talking about Bob in accounting, but
Exactly.
yeah.
Nothing against Bob in accounting, but yeah, that people will be less defensive in those
Mhm.
conversations when they're
Mhm.
really talking around a book. So I think
Mhm.
that's another kind of interesting
Mhm.
application for reading fiction.
I love that. And we just need breaks, right? The world is icky. And so to be able to put ourselves, 100 years ago, 100 years in the future, whatever it is, just for that period of time, it kind of gives your brain a break.
Definitely. Absolutely. And it's amazing. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's something like even reading for 6 minutes
Mhm.
has a massive
Mhm.
impact and decreasing our stress
Right.
level.
Right.
And so it's way more effective than pretty much anything else. It's more
Mhm.
effective than going for a walk, even
Hmm.
at decreasing stress
Interesting.
levels.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that we need more fun, but we
Hmm.
also need to decrease our stress.
Hmm.
So
Right. Right.
it's
And we're not saying Wall Street Journal or no, because that's
right.
probably gonna, that you're still thinking business when you're doing
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And you're not visualizing. I keep coming
Yeah.
back to that. It is that whole thing of, you're putting yourself in that town, in that
Mhm.
character, and it's almost like, an actor when they become that character that they are portraying.
Yeah.
We see stories about that where they were like, I did not want to associate with so and so when we were filming because he stayed in character the whole time and he was scary, or whatever.
Yeah.
They mentally they just stay in that. What is method acting? That's it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that is a big part of when we're reading. You pick out either a certain character that you're going to kind of focus on, or you kind of hop around, and
Yeah.
all sorts of things. But
Yeah.
um but yeah, it is hard to read without visualizing it.
Yeah.
It's especially fiction. I mean, yeah, being in a boardroom, blah,
Yeah.
working on a website, blah. But stranded on the island trying to figure out who's going to be the ruler. You're thinking about that. You're
Yeah.
feeling the hot sun, the sand between your toes, all of those things.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. So do you have favorite books?
It's
I always look for recommendations too.
I know, I to be honest, I do read more of the chick lit and beach books,
Nice.
which is really funny. And just because I do read so much business
Yep.
that I totally want to put my brain on neutral.
Yep.
And so I read those, but now if you were asked my husband that question, it would be a totally, because he I need to show him this, because I think, and I'll be honest, I'm going to sign up as soon as we're done. I think this is
Awesome.
absolutely fascinating. But and aside from anything, it will, as you said, I'll be reading things that I wouldn't normally read.
Yeah.
And so that will be good. But yeah, it's so interesting because my husband and I do not have the same taste in books. I'll look at what he's reading and go, "Ugh," and he'll
Yeah.
look at what I'm reading and go, "Ugh." But it's just like TV programs, movies, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
But it's to me, that the whole thought of that, the actual discussion, that is obviously what the appeal is.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So, we're going to veer off just a little bit. I'm not going to go too much squirrel, right? But,
Yeah.
we've been talking about leadership, and so and we talk about that a lot on this program, and being the owner, being the manager, being the whoever does not make you a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so many times that's where there are issues is, this person is in charge, but they're not a leader. So how are some things, that especially first time, because I was one of these people. I got promoted to be the head of. I
Yep.
had no clue.
Yep.
And so, how can we help our first time leaders really become that good leader?
Yeah. I mean, I think my experience was very similar to yours of the like, when I interviewed for the job, I kept using the term manager and leader interchangeably,
Mm-hmm.
and I finally got called out on it. And they're like,
Right.
"You do realize that
Mm-hmm.
those are two different
Mm-hmm.
things." Oh, yeah, I guess so.
Right.
Um, so I mean, I think to me, some of the biggest is things that would have helped me, or did help me, would be very active mentorship.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Um, because I just think, especially when um, that kind of like that loneliness sets in, I think
Mm-hmm.
that is really helpful to have somebody to go
Mm-hmm.
to bounce ideas off
Mm-hmm.
of, or be able to talk about that, to know that that's a
Mm-hmm.
normal experience. Um, I think people just talking about what their experiences
Mm-hmm.
are is really helpful. So I
Right.
think now we have podcasts and blogs and all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
really helpful resources that I think can really help
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's in that first time position of
Mm-hmm.
authority, and how do they do it with
Mm-hmm.
leadership skills. Um, I think continuing to make those types of resources available
Mm-hmm.
will be really powerful. When I did it, and I mean, my company was really small, so it wasn't like I got to go on a training course or something for
Mm-hmm.
it. And I went to my boss and was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
What should I go do? And they said, well, go read psychology books. All of this is psychology. Go read psychology books.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Which I think is also some good
Mm-hmm.
advice, but
Mm-hmm.
I think I needed some more active support
Right.
as
Or
well.
they'll tell you, we'll send you to learn how to do budgets. Ugh,
Yes.
I can either do a budget or I can delegate it.
Right.
But yeah, it's the people thing. And I think what's always, now I have not been in corporate America for quite a long time. But
Mhm.
obviously I have clients and things. And what always fascinates me is when the leader is not the manager, the department head, all of those things. And that's always a very entertaining dynamic.
Yes, definitely. I was actually having a conversation last night with some women that was about their leadership experience
Mm-hmm.
throughout their career. And they were at, retirement age. And, they were talking about that when you had age authority
Mm-hmm.
versus the positional authority. And so they're feeling now with work that they're doing, they're like, I have age authority, but I don't have the positional authority. And
Mm-hmm.
that was really interesting
Mm-hmm.
to hear about as
Right.
well. It just, there's so many
Mm-hmm.
different dimensions to
Mm-hmm.
it.
Well, and one of the things that I love is that we're finally figuring out that we need to have a mix of, say, the feminine and the masculine, what we've traditionally called those, right?
Mhm.
So empathy, and but also being able to say, no, the buck stops here.
Right.
And I think for so long, and especially when we had, and it is obviously still this way, just sheer numbers, male leaders. And they think, oh, we have to be John Wayne, right? We have to be tough, we have to be firm. And of course, a really good leader has empathy, has understanding, all of those various other things. And again, back to, we see it in books where they're like, oh yeah, this person, they understood what was going on. But and even the business books that, especially the new ones, they're
Yeah.
really talking about that, the fact that, you have to have that combination. And it's hard, I think, for women, because we're the nurturers. We don't want to say, do this or I will fire you.
Mhm.
And but it's really funny because you can tell that to your kids, right? Do this or you don't get whatever. And
Yeah.
it works just fine. But yeah, it's we want to have that empathy, that understanding, and sometimes it's just not, and
Yeah.
um I lead a volunteer group where I had to do something the other, a week or so ago, where I thought they're going to hang me up by my thumbs.
Yeah.
But it was a decision that had to be made. And, but it was interesting. And, hopefully I've learned from, all the people I've talked to and things like that, because, I said, I received guidance from others. I received this, I did that, but I was the one who made the decision.
Right.
And because that was part of it, people were wanting to blame other people. And it was so interesting because it was very cute. They were wanting to save me from being blamed. But it was like, no, yes, I got support from him and suggestions from him, but this was my decision. But you talk about some sleepless nights, right? Where,
Yeah.
it's like, they're going to hate me. And the vast majority probably didn't care. I mean, that was kind of the funny part. And then you had your two vocals. You had your, oh my God, we're really, really mad, and you're the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's challenging. And as you said, that's where we need mentors. We need people that we can say, have you gone through this? And what was, what are some suggestions you have?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
And that is where it's hard for women, because especially as we get higher and higher in businesses, there's not a lot of those people. But I think
Right.
we are learning. And the really funny thing is, I think we thought we have to have a female mentor.
I was just
No.
about to say that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a female mentor.
Right.
Can
Right.
be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And men can have female mentors also.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, in my head for a long time, it'd be like, I need to find my mentor. And it's like, no, it's okay to have,
Mm-hmm.
your board of advisors,
Right.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
your own personal board of
Mm-hmm.
advisors, and have a group of people
Mm-hmm.
where they have different
Mm-hmm.
experiences and different skill
Mm-hmm.
sets and different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll share those with you, and then you
Mm-hmm.
get to make the decision yourself.
Right. Yeah,
So,
and like you said, then you have to make the decision. And I think that is one of the hard things, right? Where it's like, but Harry Potter had to decide, this is what I'm going to do, right? And all of these, back to the books, it really did, no matter what it is, even if it's the romance, and it was usually the she, right? She had to decide, was she going to marry him and ride off into the sunset or not?
right.
But yeah, it just doesn't go, well, she couldn't decide, so they went and had cookies.
Yeah.
That's not going to be a good book.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So what are some other tips that you have for folks?
I think, I mean, I said this a couple of times. I really do think that people need to have hobbies. I've noticed, and I'm not sure why this is, but almost people making jokes about hobbies or
Mm-hmm.
looking down on
Mm-hmm.
people that have hobbies. And I'm like, I feel like one of the things that I really appreciate that, or think we
Mm-hmm.
got out of the pandemic, was
Mm-hmm.
that we all of a sudden our whole lives were in one space. And so we
Right.
were just going to work and or going home. It was like, nope, home and work very much
Yeah.
together
You
now.
change this
And
chair, right? And if
yeah,
you were lucky, you
exactly.
got to change chairs.
Yes, definitely. And so I just think if it's reading, that's great. If it's a
Mhm.
different activity or something else that really speaks to you, but having those active interests outside of work, I just think are
Mhm.
really, it's just so
Mhm.
important. Again, we can talk about, it was like, we could talk about burnout. We could talk
Mhm.
about, but
Mhm.
there, there's so much that we get out of having creative interests
Right.
outside of work.
Right. Well, and outside of your family also,
And that, yeah,
it's, I, yes, people should be devoted to their children, but at some point, those little kids go fly that nest, right?
they do.
And, so if you've had that hobby, that whatever all along, then maybe it grows, maybe it doesn't. And of course, I think one of the fun things that we've seen is the people who their hobby became their business.
Yes.
And I'm looking at you because yeah, you were reading books, and not that this is this huge money making $1 million thing, but it can be a business, where people pay for memberships, and they maybe already do, sorry,
They
but
don't, not right, not yet.
but yeah, I mean, as it grows, that will be something to really be thinking about is, how can you monetize it?
Yeah.
And and go forward, and I think that's something that so many people think, well, it's back to the books, it's not either or. Your
Mhm.
hobby can be your passion that you make money at.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. So,
Well, Melanie, we didn't even talk about your other life, your business life, so
no,
tell
that's
us
okay.
very shortly about Strategic Peace.
Sure. So, I think the introduction covered a lot of it. We work with companies that have B2B business models. Um, Most of the time, companies that have already launched, they have a few customers under their
Mhm,
belt, so they know what it takes to get a
mhm,
sale. And then they're ready to turn a marketing engine
mhm,
on to up their sales. And so
mhm,
that's really our sweet spot
mhm,
where we come in and help them figure out the marketing aspect, but making sure that
mhm.
we do all the top of the funnel brand awareness, lead generation stuff, but also that it's really thought through the entire life cycle that a customer will go through.
I love it. And
Yeah.
how do they find out more about that?
So the website is Strategic Peace, PIECE,
Not
strategicpeace.com.
peace.
Exactly. But we do have a lot of puns
Mhm,
for that.
mhm.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. And how do they find out more about Leaders Who Fiction?
Sure. So the website for that is leaderswhofiction.com. People can also find me on LinkedIn, and then hopefully pretty obvious how to follow that. And then from the website, people can sign up for meetings. I do ask people need to register to get the Zoom details, and then that way it gets on
Mhm,
people's calendars. But also, I know how many people to
mhm.
expect
Right.
in the meetings.
Mhm.
And like I said, it's right now it's free to join, so
Mhm.
there's not a cost involved, and people can just show up and read the book and then show up.
Right, right. Got to read the book first. And no
Exactly.
Cliff Notes, folks, version. No,
Yeah.
but it's okay to listen to it,
Yes.
but yeah, you have to have read the
Read the book.
book.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very cool, very cool. And again, the website is
Leaderswhofiction.com.
cool. Well, I knew we were going to have so much fun, and I'm going to sign up. I think this is great
Good.
fun. It's really funny, but I'm looking at the first book going, I'm not sure that's my cup of tea.
Mhm.
And so the April book, as we said, is All the Sinners Bleed. So I might skip and not
Yeah,
go until, but anyhow, it's interesting. But like you said, it's not required attendance. So,
exactly.
that's fun. But if I don't sign up now, I'll forget. Um,
Yes.
so I will do that. But do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Um, I think the one thing I will say, because people will always ask me this and they'll say, well, what would you say to people who aren't readers? I'm like, then don't read. It's okay if you're not a reader, go find your thing. But if you are a reader, it doesn't need to always fall off your plate. It can be a priority. So that's it. That's my
I love it. I love it. Well, I've been having so much fun talking with Melanie Bell, the founder of Leaders Who Fiction. I'm Deb Creer, and until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.